Hey guys, Drifter here. Today I've got a very serious video for you about the upcoming TikTok ban and its potential forced sale to former CEO of Activision Bobby Kotick. Today I'm going to try my absolute best to give you a summary of what's going on and then share a variety of my opinions about the situation. The video structure is mostly going to be like old school gameplay commentary, but I'll have some articles and some references to throw on screen as well. So by now you've certainly heard that TikTok may be banned in the very near future. Even my boomer parents are aware of this, but what you might not have heard is that the former CEO of Activision, or CEO until he sold it to Microsoft, Bobby Kotick, might be buying TikTok as his own personal toy like Elon Musk's is. And as Call of Duty fans, that probably made your heart skip a beat, and not in a good, excited kind of way. Rather, it was probably in a existential dread sort of way. And this is a very complex situation that is very impactful not only on gaming and our social media platforms, but also how we understand our First Amendment rights to free speech. It involves multiple branches of government, multiple legislative or regulatory bodies, and it's changing rapidly. My production times are a little slow, so if this situation updates in the day or two it takes to make the video, I apologize, but I'm going to try my best to keep everybody in the loop. So question number one is, why is TikTok being banned to begin with? Well, technically it's not going to be banned outright, but rather it's going to be subjected to a divestiture or regulations. Divestiture means they're going to be forced to sell to a new owner. The people who own it now are no longer going to be allowed to own it. And as many of you know, TikTok is owned and controlled by the government of China, and Chinese leaders have made it very clear that they will not be selling TikTok and that they will not comply. And American legislators have made it very clear that if they do not comply, then the app gets shut down. So in some ways, it's not an outright ban, but it is playing chicken with being banned. So our lawmakers have believed, and I think rightfully so, that TikTok has been a national security threat for a long time. At the end of the day, it is an app that was created and at least partially still managed by the Communist Party of China, which is a foreign adversary of the United States. To be fair, though, that is true of almost every type of Chinese tech, because the Chinese government usually gets some percentage of ownership of corporations, often funds corporations, and they regulate them very, very closely, often staffing them with party members. So whereas corporations and the government in the United States might be separate, in China, they're much more intertwined with each other. The app collects an incredible amount of personal data on its users, perhaps even more so than Facebook, Google, Apple, or other American big tech companies. It'll learn stuff about your biometric data, your psychographic data, your demographic data, when you wake up, when you go to sleep, what you eat, what you spend your money on, almost everything about you. It knows what kind of girls or guys you like. That's very easy for it to figure out. And then all of this information is shared with the Communist Party of China, which is a foreign adversary to the United States, thus, in theory, making TikTok a nearly perfect spy tool. And this is very concerning because they're not just harvesting your demographic data, they're harvesting your psychographic data. They're learning how you actually think, how you respond to certain things. So in my opinion, having such a powerful tool and such a powerful information resource being controlled by a government that is adversarial to our own and antithetical to most of our ideals is a bad thing. It's a very reasonable thing to be concerned about. And also another opinion, I wish that we were half as concerned about American companies doing exactly the same thing as we were about TikTok. TikTok's getting a lot of heat and a lot of focus. What they're doing is only different than what we're doing because the government ownership structure between the two companies is different. Our lawmakers are also concerned about the influence that TikTok wields. I think we've all seen how a change in ownership can radically alter the entire political landscape of a platform, like, say, Twitter when Elon Musk bought it. The CCP can do the exact same thing with TikTok, and they are likely already doing so. They have the ability to put their thumb on the scales and weight certain topics and wield incredible political influence in the United States because of that. So instead of the really ham-fisted way that Elon Musk did this with Twitter, the really brain-dead, shameless way, TikTok is a lot more subtle, which is definitely worse. It's much harder to see. The algorithms are much more complex. The pushes, the nods, the dopamine loops are way, way, way better researched than just forcing Twitter to go red. On top of that, TikTok is probably the most popular app in the Western world right now, with literally hundreds of millions of people using it daily, and probably hundreds of millions of that group using it as a primary resource for information, which, as an opinion of mine, I want to make very clear. I think it is a terrible idea to use social media as a primary source of information, but I can't really do anything about that. I can't control how other people think. What this means is that it's very easy for a U.S. foreign adversary to control or at least significantly influence narratives into the U.S., and that is, again, a very reasonable concern. Then finally, the last concern from our lawmakers is that the short-form content on TikTok creates dopamine loops for its users and ultimately gets them addicted and is damaging to their brains. Now, this is a topic that we have covered in depth in its entirety in a different video that I have linked down there below the description on why I personally choose to avoid short form content. But to summarize that, it is scientifically proven to be addicting, and that users on this or Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts or even what used to be Bird app are effectively in little short dopamine loops. And the end result of this is that it annihilates attention spans. It's way worse in children. We have an entire generation of kids growing up now nearly almost completely addicted to their phones. And some lawmakers believe that this was an intentional design by the CCP to sort of rot the brains of American children. And that's something that I agree with, but do want to offer the opinion that American companies build very similar systems that are just as damaging, and they're not being criticized for it just because they're American. So it's like, Chinese blows up our kids' brains, bad. Mark Zuckerberg blows up your kids' brains, hey, freedom. There's something weird about that to me. So that's sort of the reasons why. Let's move into the mechanics of how TikTok might get banned. Our United States House of Representatives drafted a bill to sort of bring this app under American control. It should be very important to note that most of the bill was drafted in secret and then voted on in committee very quickly. I believe it was unanimous in committee. It had very strong Republican support and equally strong Democratic support. This is both parties seem to agree on this particular issue. Thus, it was very quickly sent through the committee and straight to the Senate for signing. Leaders of the House of Representatives pressured both the Senate and Joe Biden to sign and do this quickly. And Joe Biden has already committed to signing it into law if it passes the Senate. So there is a very high probability that some version of this bill will become law in the coming months. And I should point out that there are, while it does have bipartisan support, there's a fair number of dissenting opinions about this. It's kind of a weird coalition of the far right and far left. You've got, it's a weird day when Rand Paul and the ACLU are on the same team arguing the same philosophical points of view. Things have gone very wrong when the ACLU and Rand Paul are being BFFs for the day. Something is very concerning there. So what the bill essentially requires right now, could change in the future, is it requires that ByteDance, which is the parent company of TikTok, sell TikTok to U.S. investors. Some American citizen or American corporation will ultimately own TikTok and then it continue. The app will be allowed to continue to run without government oversight and without significant changes as long as it's American owned and not Chinese owned. And I would like to make it very clear that the CCP has been extremely upfront about the fact that they are not selling TikTok and they don't really intend to comply with a lot of this, which means, according to the bill, the government would then reserve the right to ban the software from American servers and might force corporations like Apple and Google to pull it off of their app stores, which is a lot of preamble to get through in a video like this, but it does fully bring us back around to the thumbnail topic of today, which is Bobby Kotick might actually buy TikTok. And before I explain that point, I wanted to give a shout out to Logitech G and one of their products that's helping make this video better, which is the Litra Glow. As most of you have noticed, I'm streaming from a bed. One thing you don't see is just barely off this camera. See my hand getting whiter as I reach up. There is a little soft light behind my webcam that makes all of this look much better. I did a full review of this product in a different video, but essentially it's a very lightweight, very easy to use, very little light that you put directly behind your webcam, and it pretty much instantly improves your video quality. If you would like to check this product out, it's linked down there below, and I also linked some of my fuller reviews in case you're curious. All right, sponsorship section is done. Let's talk about Bobby Kotick. So we've talked about divestiture. It's forcing TikTok to sell to either an American citizen or an American corporation or a collection of American citizens and corporations. The only people that have the money to invest in or buy TikTok, should it be forced to public sale, are going to be billionaires and mega corporations. Those guys are in a club that you and I are not in, and they have basically already gotten the heads up that an extremely valuable asset is on sale. And they are behaving like vultures, just flying in circles, watching TikTok as it tries to cross a desert of legislation. And among the few that have had opinions about this is that Bobby Kotick has stepped up and said that he has an interest in buying TikTok. This is the man who oversaw the decline of Call of Duty. He ultimately signed off on a variety of boneheaded decisions that were very bad for Warzone over the last few years. Even had his company investigated by the Department of Justice for sexually abusing employees, some of which died, which is a whole different drama we covered in a different video. Because of these very simple facts, I believe that this man is in no way qualified to own TikTok. That being said, most of the other billionaires that are expressing interest in TikTok aren't any better morally or baggage-wise. And a lot of the corporations that are interested aren't exactly the good ones that you would think would, it's not like Facebook wants to buy it. It's more like BlackRock and investment groups and OpenAI want to buy TikTok and do weird things with it. And I think that what a lot of billionaires and corporations saw is actually what Elon Musk did with Twitter. Elon was able to buy himself an outrageous amount of personal and political influence, even if Twitter is losing money. People dog on him like, he lost $44 billion. It was worth 44, and now it's worth like 12 billion or something like that. And that's a lot of money to lose. But Elon was also able to buy part of the national narrative, which does provide incredible value to him, and it allows him to do favors for politicians. I think all the other billionaires would like to do like Elon, and that they would like to buy TikTok in order to buy themselves an increased amount of influence. George Carlin said it. There's a big club out there, and you and I are not in it. So far, we've mostly talked about the facts of what's going on, of why we want TikTok banned, how that procedure would look, who would end up buying it, and I've sprinkled in some of my opinions along the way. But now, in the back half of the video, I would just like to fully drop my opinions on you. You don't have to agree with me, but I hope that you at least find it an interesting point to analyze a problem from. Opinion number one is that I acknowledge that TikTok is an app that is extremely harmful to the fabric of society. And this is coming from a guy who posts on TikTok daily. I do 2 or 3 TikToks per day and have done that for years, same with Bird App and other places. In my defense, I'm mostly doing counter programming, which is long form stuff on TikTok, long videos, science topics, analysis kind of like this. Instead of sort of the brain rot that most people are on, but I'm still here using it, so that's my bias. Despite that, I acknowledge the fact that the app is as damaging to youth mental development as hard drugs. It's not great for adults' attention spans either, and on top of all of this, TikTok is being controlled by a foreign adversary that would like nothing more than to do harm to the US, or at least weaken our international position. This set of factors, I believe, is a recipe for disaster, and I genuinely believe that TikTok is already causing societal harm. However, so is almost every other social media company in the West. Facebook does this, YouTube does this, Twitter, X, whatever does this. Every social media site, every Apple, every Google, every major tech company in the West is doing exactly the same thing that TikTok is, including trying to influence politics and including blowing up children's brains with nonsense dopamine cycles. But they're not getting any criticism. They're not getting any flack. And I understand that uniquely, TikTok is foreign adversary, but a lot of the same type of harms that TikTok causes are also being caused by American apps. And it's frustrating to me that they are also not facing any regulation whatsoever when they're just as dangerous. All of that wishy-washiness aside, I do believe that TikTok needs to be regulated. It genuinely, truly does. However, I do disagree with how this is being handled, because I believe that precedents matter. In case you're unfamiliar, a precedent is a reason why we did a thing, an explanation, usually a scope or limitation on it. And that's why, the Supreme Court sets precedents. They solve complex decisions and lay out the reasoning why, so that if a similar situation happens in the future, we can follow that reasoning. So precedents are extremely important, and anytime the government does something that restricts a freedom, that action must be taken within a limited scope and with very clearly defined reasons. Basically, I would like for the law to be very well written, for it to be very concise, to have defined reasons of action to be easy to understand, and hopefully some degree of future-proofing and guardrails against abuse, so that in the future, if an app needs regulation or something in our social media or collective discussion space needs attention, we have a set of procedures and rules and reasons why to do that and how to apply these laws. What you don't want is what we have here with the TikTok ban, where it's kind of a vagueness to it. There's like the overall framework isn't as concise as what I would like. It does, and this is a little bit of an exaggeration. They do have defined reasons, but with bipartisan support and the way it's written, my opinion is that it kind of gives the government a blank check to do whatever they want with social media companies. The excuses given are such that they could really apply to American companies too. I don't like the secret nature of the law, how most of it was drafted behind closed doors, and the bipartisan support means that it's going to roll out and nobody's going to really oversee this. So one of the good things about a democracy is if, let's say, one party does something, the other party will often act as watchdogs and ensure that that plan, that action is going to be handled appropriately. That's probably not going to happen here on TikTok. Rather, I think that they're going to just request power from us, the citizens, to ban things, instead of setting out a framework for a well-defined response to a public safety concern. Therefore, I do not support the TikTok ban. I would rather have this damaging app continue to destroy the brains of American children and frustrate me than I would see our First Amendment freedoms being eroded. I think that there are better ways to do this. And finally, about as politically specific as we're going to get today, I believe that this is a tactical error for Democrats. I genuinely believe that if you were to hire me or somebody as a neutral political strategist, somebody who doesn't really have personal beliefs on right and wrong and just wants to win votes, that strategist would say that Joe Biden signing the TikTok ban would be a very, very, very bad idea for their party, because Democrats rely very heavily on the youth voting bloc to carry them through certain election hurdles. They also rely very heavily on social media platforms like TikTok and formerly Bird app, when it was a more left-wing place, to inform their voters of various platform goals and policy decisions. This is a demographic that uses TikTok and other social media apps more than anybody else. It's very intrinsic to their lives. It's how they maintain friends. It's how they learn about things. It's their social networks. And I believe that even if this app is a genuine threat, that if Joe Biden signs the TikTok ban bill, he is likely going to infuriate a massive portion of his voting base, and they're not going to support him in upcoming elections that are already predicted to be very close. I genuinely believe that doing this might be political suicide, but only for the Democratic Party. Even though it's bipartisan, Republican voting-based demographics do not overlap very strongly with TikTok users, so way less Republicans are going to be mad about that, and it's going to affect them almost none. So I see this as Democrats literally shooting themselves in the foot. And that's kind of my overall analysis and opinion about this complex topic. It can be best summed up of, I know TikTok is harmful for a lot of different reasons. So are American companies. I wish they would be regulated too. And if we are going to regulate these things, can we do it in a really smart way instead of a ham-fisted way, which right now we're ham-fisting and it's very frustrating. But guys, that is all for this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.